She said, "If you can make me cry with just food, I'll give you 5 stars." He didn't smile. He just started cooking. It was 8:47 p.m. on a Friday when hunger finally won. Not the gentle kind that whispers suggestions, but the demanding sort that makes your stomach clench and your patience evaporate. The hotel restaurant had closed an hour ago. Room service ended at 8. The vending machine on her floor was broken, displaying a handwritten sign that read, "Out of order, sorry," in cheerful blue ink that somehow made it worse. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the hotel lobby in her wrinkled conference blazer, scrolling through delivery apps that showed nothing but closed and unavailable in your area. 3 days of medical symposiums, protein bars for lunch, and exactly 4 hours of sleep had reduced her usually sharp decision-making skills to basic survival instincts. The concierge, a young man with kind eyes and an apologetic smile, leaned across the marble counter. "There's one place," he said hesitantly. "Might still be open. It's not fancy, but the owner sometimes stays late." Sarah looked up from her phone. "How not fancy are we talking?" "It's authentic. Family place. Been there 40 years. Owner's a bit of a character, but the food..." He made a chef's kiss gesture. 2 blocks north, then left on Maple. Look for the red door with the chipped paint. 2 blocks felt like 2 miles in heels that hadn't been designed for actual walking. The restaurant didn't look like much from the outside. A narrow storefront squeezed between a used bookstore and a dry cleaner, with Nana's Kitchen painted in faded gold letters across the window. The red door was indeed chipped, and a small open sign flickered uncertainly in the glass. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of garlic, tomatoes, and something else. Something that smelled like comfort itself. The dining room was small, maybe 12 tables covered in red checkered tablecloths. Only 2 were occupied. An elderly couple sharing a bottle of wine, and a man in paint-splattered overalls reading a newspaper while twirling spaghetti. Behind the counter, she could see into the kitchen where a man moved with the fluid precision of someone who'd been cooking longer than she'd been alive. Gray streaked his dark hair, and his hands, scarred from years of knife work, moved without hesitation as he chopped something that made the entire space smell like heaven. A woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Mid-40s, warm brown eyes, the kind of smile that made you feel like you just walked into your grandmother's house. "We're technically closed," she said, but not unkindly. "Kitchen's supposed to shut down at 8. Sarah felt her shoulders sag. "The hotel concierge said you might still be open. I know it's late. I just..." "Marco," the woman called toward the kitchen. "We got a hungry one." The man looked up from his cutting board, studied Sarah for a moment, then nodded once. "What you want to eat?" Sarah blinked. I don't know. I've been living on conference food for 3 days. Anything that's actually made with love instead of a heat lamp would be perfect." Marco set down his knife and really looked at her then. The kind of look that seemed to see past the professional facade to the exhausted human underneath. "You sit," he said, gesturing to a corner table. "I cook something. But I should look at a menu." "No menu," the woman said, extending her hand. "I'm Rosa, by the way, Marco's wife, and you look like you need to let someone else make the decisions for a while." Sarah found herself at the corner table, her blazer draped over the back of her chair, watching Marco through the kitchen window. He moved like he was conducting a symphony, tasting, adjusting, adding pinches of herbs with the confidence of someone who cooked by instinct rather than recipe. Rosa brought over a glass of red wine without being asked. "On the house. You look like you've had a week." "Try a year," Sarah said, accepting the wine gratefully. "I'm a surgeon. Was supposed to be here presenting research, but honestly, I've been running on fumes for months." Rosa nodded knowingly. "Marco and we've been married 32 years. Opened this place when our kids were little. I can spot someone who's forgotten how to slow down from across the room." Through the window, Sarah watched Marco layer something into a pan with the care of an artist. "He always cook like that?" "Always. Drives me crazy sometimes. We could serve 3 times as many people if he'd just batch cook like normal restaurants. But he says food made in a hurry tastes like a hurry." Rosa smiled. He's not wrong. A young girl appeared from the back room, maybe 13, with Marco's dark eyes and Rosa's warm smile. She carried a worn paperback and settled into a booth near the kitchen, clearly accustomed to doing homework while surrounded by the sounds of cooking. "That's Isabella," Rosa said. "Our youngest. The boys are off at college, but she still likes hanging around here after school." Sarah watched the girl flip through her book, occasionally looking up to watch her father cook. "She want to be a chef too? God, I hope not," Rosa laughed. "This business will break your heart and your back. But she loves being here, loves watching him work. Says it's better than Netflix." Marco appeared beside their table, setting down a plate that made Sarah's mouth water instantly. It looked simple, pasta with what appeared to be a basic tomato sauce, but the smell was extraordinary. "What is this?" Sarah asked. "Spaghetti al pomodoro," Marco said simply. "Nothing fancy, but I make the sauce from tomatoes my cousin grows in New Jersey. The pasta, I make this morning. The basil, Rosa grows on the windowsill." He started to walk away, then paused. "You eat slow. Food like this, you don't rush." The first bite stopped conversation entirely. Sarah had eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants, had traveled the world for conferences, had sampled cuisines from Tokyo to Paris. But this simple pasta dish hit something deeper than taste buds. It tasted like safety, like sitting at her grandmother's table when she was 8 years old, like the kind of meal that made you remember what it felt like to be taken care of. She looked up to find Marco watching her through the kitchen window, his expression unreadable. "Good?" Rosa asked quietly. Sarah realized she was crying. Not sobbing, just tears sliding silently down her cheeks as she took another bite. "I haven't tasted anything in months," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I've eaten, but I haven't actually tasted food. I've been so focused on work, on proving myself, on the next surgery, the next conference, the next promotion." She set down her fork and looked at Rosa. "How did he know?" Rosa smiled gently. 32 years of marriage. I've learned Marco doesn't just cook. He pays attention, sees what people need, even when they don't know it themselves." Isabella looked up from her book. "Papa says food is love you can taste. And some people forget what love tastes like." Marco emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. He didn't say anything, just refilled Sarah's wine glass and sat down across from her. "You a doctor?" he said. It wasn't a question. Sarah nodded. "Surgeon. Cardiac. You save lives." "I try to." Marco nodded slowly. "Good work. Important work. But who saves you?" The question hit like a gentle punch to the chest. Sarah stared at him, fork halfway to her mouth. I don't need saving. I mean, I chose this life. I knew what I was signing up for." Marco raised an eyebrow. "You choose to forget how to taste food? You choose to cry when someone makes you simple pasta?" Sarah set down her fork, suddenly feeling exposed. "It's complicated." "No," Marco said simply. "Is simple. You just make it complicated." Isabella giggled softly from her booth. Rosa shot her a warning look, but she was smiling too. "You always this direct with customers?" Sarah asked. "Only ones who need it," Marco replied. "Most people, they come here, they eat, they leave happy. But some people," he gestured toward her plate, "some people come here hungry for more than food." Sarah finished the pasta in contemplative silence, each bite somehow better than the last. When she finally set down her fork, she felt more satisfied than she had in months. "What do I owe you?" she asked, reaching for her purse. Marco shook his head. "Nothing. I can't." "You already pay," he said. "You remember how to taste. That's enough." Rosa stood up. "Marco, don't be ridiculous. She has to pay something." Marco looked at his wife with the kind of expression that suggested this was an old argument. "Fine. $20. Sarah blinked. "For pasta like that? In Manhattan? Are you insane? You want to pay more?" Marco asked, genuinely confused. "I want to pay what it's worth." Marco considered this. "What it worth to you?" Sarah thought about it. The conference registration alone had cost $800. Her hotel room was $300 a night. But this meal, this moment of actually tasting food again, of being seen and fed and cared for by strangers, more than I can afford to pay, she said honestly. Marco nodded. Then $20 is right. She came back the next night. Not because she was hungry, the conference had provided adequate dinner, but because she couldn't stop thinking about that pasta, about Marco's gentle directness, about the way Isabella had looked up from her book to offer wisdom that most adults never learned. Back again, Rosa said, looking pleased but not surprised. Is that weird? Honey. Weird would be not coming back after a meal like that. Marco appeared from the kitchen, nodded once at Sarah, and disappeared again. 5 minutes later, he brought out something different. Risotto with mushrooms that smelled like autumn forests. I didn't order anything, Sarah protested. You don't need to, Isabella said from her homework booth. Papa already knows what you need. And he was right. The risotto was creamy perfection. Each grain of rice perfectly al dente. The mushrooms earthy and rich. But more than that, it was made with attention, with care, with the kind of love that you could actually taste. How long have you been cooking? Sarah asked when Marco came to check on her. Since I was Isabella's age. My nana, she teach me in Sicily. Not recipes, you understand. Feeling. How to listen to food, how to make it sing. Sarah nodded, even though she wasn't sure she understood. And you came here when? 1987. Rosa and me, we get married, we want to start new life. America, land of opportunity, yes. He smiled, but there was something bittersweet in it. We work 3 jobs each, save every penny. Finally open this place in 92. Was it hard? Starting over in a new country. Marco was quiet for a moment. Everything worthwhile is hard. But hard doesn't mean wrong. Sometimes hard means you doing something that matters. Isabella looked up from her homework. Tell her about the early days, Papa. Marco shot his daughter a look, but Rosa laughed. Oh, you should hear this. The first year, we barely had any customers. Marco would make these elaborate meals for like 3 people a night. I kept telling him to simplify, do what other restaurants do, frozen this, pre-made that. But he refused. I come to America to make food with love, Marco said simply. Not to make money with shortcuts. So what changed? Sarah asked. Word of mouth, Rosa said. One person would bring a friend, friend would bring family. Takes time to build trust, but once people taste real food, made with real care, she shrugged. They keep coming back. 22 on the 3rd night, Sarah didn't even pretend she was there for the food. Well, she was, but she was also there for something else, something she couldn't quite name. Rough day? Rosa asked, noting Sarah's particularly rumpled appearance. Lost a patient, Sarah said simply. 19 years old. Car accident. Did everything right, textbook surgery, but sometimes, she shrugged helplessly. Marco appeared with a bowl of soup, simple chicken broth with pasta and vegetables, but it smelled like healing. Pastina in brodo, he said, setting it down gently. What my nana make me when I was sick, when I was sad, when world felt too heavy. Sarah took a sip and closed her eyes. It tasted like being a child again, like someone's strong hands taking care of everything while you just focused on getting better. I became a surgeon to save people, she said after a few spoonfuls. But days like today, I wonder if I'm strong enough for this job. Isabella looked up from her book. My papa says strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting back up and still caring enough to keep trying. Sarah looked at the teenager with surprise. That's pretty wise for 13. Isabella grinned. I have good teachers. Marco sat down across from Sarah again. You know what I think? What? I think you too worried about being strong enough, smart enough, good enough. But you already good enough. The crying, the sadness when you lose someone, that not weakness. That what makes you human doctor instead of machine doctor. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. I'm not used to being this emotional. Maybe that's the problem, Rosa said gently. Maybe you've been so busy being professional, you forgot how to be person. The 4th night, Sarah brought something with her. A manila folder thick with papers. "What's this?" Rosa asked, curious. "Research," Sarah said. "I've been presenting at this conference about new surgical techniques, but honestly, sitting here the past few nights, I've been thinking about something else entirely." Marco emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands. "Oh," Sarah opened the folder. "There's this program I've been considering. Medical mission work. Doctors Without Borders, that kind of thing. I've always wanted to do it, but I kept telling myself I needed to establish my career first, build my reputation, make my mark in academic medicine." She spread out some photographs, field hospitals, doctors working in difficult conditions, patients who clearly had very little but were smiling anyway. "But sitting here, eating your food, watching how you care for people." Sarah looked up at Marco. "I keep thinking about what you said, about doing something that matters versus just doing something that looks impressive." Isabella had abandoned her homework and come over to look at the pictures. "You'd really go to places like this?" Sarah nodded. "It's scary. It would mean giving up my position at the hospital, my apartment, basically starting over professionally. But I can't stop thinking about it." Marco studied the photographs carefully. "What scares you most?" "Failing," Sarah said immediately. "Being out of my depth. Not being able to help as much as I want to." Marco nodded slowly. "When I first come to America, I speak maybe 50 words English. I know how to cook Sicilian food, but Americans, they want chicken parmesan, they want spaghetti and meatballs, things my nana never make. I was terrified I would fail, that we would lose everything. But you didn't fail." "Oh, I failed plenty times," Marco laughed. "First month, I burn everything. I make sauce too salty, pasta too soft. I cry in the kitchen while Rosa tells customers we running behind." "So what changed?" Marco was quiet for a moment. "Rosa, she tell me something. She say, 'Marco, you not failing because you doing it wrong. You failing because you trying to be someone else. Just be yourself, but be yourself better.'" Sarah absorbed this. "And that worked. Eventually, I stopped trying to make what I think Americans want. I just make what I know how to make. But I make it with all my heart. People taste the difference." Isabella nodded sagely. "Papa says authentic always beats perfect." On her last night in the city, Sarah arrived at Nana's kitchen with a decision made. She'd spent the day withdrawing from conferences, making phone calls, sending emails that would change the trajectory of her career. "So?" Rosa asked, not needing to specify what she was asking about. "I'm doing it," Sarah said, and felt a weight lift off her chest as she said the words out loud. "Leaving for Honduras in 3 months. There's a clinic there that needs cardiac surgeons, and they're willing to train me in tropical medicine." Isabella clapped her hands together. "That's so cool. You're going to save so many people." Marco appeared from the kitchen with a plate Sarah hadn't seen before, something that looked like a celebration on ceramic. "What is this?" she asked. "Osso buco," Marco said. "Special occasion food. Takes 6 hours to make properly." Sarah stared at him. "You knew I was going to decide tonight?" Marco shrugged. "I start cooking this morning. Food like this you don't make unless you're sure it's going to be appreciated." The osso buco was extraordinary. Tender meat that fell off the bone, rich sauce that spoke of hours of patient attention, vegetables that had absorbed all the complex flavors. It was the kind of meal that marked important moments, that said this dinner mattered. "I'm going to miss this," Sarah said after her first bite. "Miss this place, miss you all. Food like this you can make anywhere," Marco said. "I teach you." Sarah looked up in surprise. "What?" "Basic risotto, simple pasta sauce, how to make soup that heals. Not complicated, but takes practice. Takes caring." Rosa smiled. "He's right. You can't take us with you, but you can take what we've taught you." Isabella jumped up from her booth. "I'll write down Nana's chicken soup recipe. The real one, not the simplified version." They spent the next hour in the kitchen, Marco patiently showing Sarah how to make a proper sofrito, how to tell when pasta water was perfectly salted, how to taste a sauce and know exactly what it needed. "Cooking is like surgery," he said as she practiced stirring risotto. You need technique, yes, but you also need to feel what's happening. Listen to the food. Trust your instincts. Sarah nodded, concentrating on the rhythm of stirring. I've spent so many years ignoring my instincts, trying to follow protocols and procedures. Protocols important, Marco agreed. But protocols, they tell you what to do. Instincts tell you how to do it with heart. Isabella sat on a stool nearby, writing recipe notes in careful handwriting. Papa, tell her about the secret ingredient. Marco smiled. Ah yes, the most important thing, but you cannot measure it, cannot buy it in store. What is it? Sarah asked. Attention, Marco said simply. Real attention. When you cook for someone, you think about who they are, what they need, how to make them feel cared for. That's what makes food taste like love. When it was time to leave, Sarah stood in the doorway of Nana's kitchen, looking back at this small space that had somehow changed everything. How much do I owe you? She asked. For everything, the meals, the lessons, the what? Rosa asked gently. The reminder that I'm human, Sarah said softly. Marco walked over and handed her a small container. Sauce, he said. For when you get to Honduras and everything feels too hard. You heat this up, make some pasta. Remember that you are loved, even when you're far from home. Sarah felt tears threatening again. I don't know how to thank you. You don't thank us, Isabella said, coming over to hug her. You just remember what Papa taught you about cooking with love. And you save lots of people and make the world better. Marco nodded. And maybe when you come back to New York, you come see us. Tell us about your adventures. Definitely, Sarah promised. She started toward the door, then turned back. Marco, that first night, when I said if you could make me cry with just food, I'd give you 5 stars. Marco nodded. I never asked. Where should I leave the review? Marco smiled and pointed to Isabella, who was beaming. You already did. Best reviews, they word of mouth. You tell someone about this place, about food made with love, that worth more than 5 stars. 6 months later, Sarah sent a postcard from Honduras. It showed a sunset over mountains, and on the back, in her careful handwriting, Dear Nana's Kitchen family, the clinic is challenging but amazing. I've performed 200 surgeries and trained 15 local doctors. Most importantly, I've been cooking. The chicken soup recipe saves homesick volunteers. The risotto impresses visiting donors. And every meal reminds me that caring for people means more than just medical care. The secret ingredient travels well. Missing you all. Love, Sarah. P.S. Isabella. I'm teaching a 14-year-old girl here to cook. She reminds me of someone I know. Smart, wise, and not afraid to speak the truth. The postcard was pinned to the wall behind the register, next to dozens of others from customers who had become friends, from travelers who had found more than food at the small restaurant with the red door. Marco read it again while stirring sauce for the evening service, smiled, and added just a little more love to the pot. Sometimes the most important transformations don't happen in operating rooms or conference halls. They happen at small tables with checkered tablecloths, where strangers become family and food becomes medicine for souls that forgot how to be nourished. This wasn't a story about fine dining. It was about finding your way back to yourself, one carefully prepared meal at a time. Life isn't always about the impressive career moves or the big achievements. Sometimes it's about the people who see you when you're lost and feed you until you remember who you are. If the story made you hungry, not just for food, but for connection, for authenticity, for the kind of care that can't be ordered online, find your local family restaurant. Sit down. Order slowly. Taste everything. Let someone take care of you for an hour. You might be surprised what you discover when you finally slow down long enough to be nourished.